I had all these grandiose plans of climbing some of the biggest mountains in the world. That was my objective. Even before the 7 summits of the world had been climbed, which are the highest mountains in each of the 7 continents, I wanted to do that. I'd never heard anybody talk about it, but I wanted to be the first one. But when I found out I had diabetes, it was just a major hit. It just changed my whole life. I went from being a very capable athlete to being someone who now is giving themselves injections numerous times during the day, having to check your blood sugar, and on and on. You know, I had like 1 shot in my entire life. You know, my mom kept me away from all the vaccines, and now I was giving myself multiple injections every day and sticking my fingers every day. I would estimate that I have given myself 130,000-ish insulin injections into my abdomen. That's a lot of times, you know, that you become a pincushion. You know, a big pincushion. My name is Greg Cummings. I'm 62 years old, and I've had type 1 diabetes for 38 years. And I hold the world record for the number of vertical feet climbed in a year. The Manitou Incline was constructed in 1907. It basically had a car at the top and a car at the bottom for the maintenance of a water system up there. In the 1990s, there was a rock slide up there, and the owners decided not to repair it and just to disassemble it and leave it. Over time, it became a hiking trail that hundreds of thousands of people ascend every year. It's a considerable hike, 2,768 steps. Marker on the bottom step says number 1. Recently, I set the record on the incline at 1,825 ascents up and down in 1 year. Just to give you an idea of how high that is, Mount Everest sits at 29,028 feet. The International Space Station orbits at 1.31 million vertical feet. My record is 3.65 million vertical feet. Anyone who has ever hiked the incline 5 times in a day knows the challenge of going home, getting a little bit of rest, and then turning around and going back to the incline the next day and starting up the mountain again to hike it another 5 times. It's very challenging for your body, for your mind, for, you know, your family, and it's pretty overwhelming. And then, of course, I have type 1 diabetes, and it's very destructive. It's hard for me to explain how challenging that is to people who have never experienced low blood glucose, high blood glucose. They can eat whatever they want, whenever they want, on and on. I can't do those things. It requires a tremendous amount of effort a tremendous amount of planning, making yourself do without when you're hungry as can be, but you're on your 4th ascent on the mountain, and you know if you take 1 unit of insulin, you're going to be in huge trouble. My disease, my illness, type 1 diabetes, is 100% incompatible with the event that I did on the mountain. They do not go together in any way, shape, or form. Dealing with very challenging situations, having the endurance in order to be able to pull off very long and complicated endeavors. And one of those is just having to deal with diabetes on a daily basis. That takes a tremendous amount of endurance for everyone with this disease. You know, the incline is an awesome trail. It attracts a lot of people. You can stand there and look at it and say, oh, I can do that. It lures people in. You know, by the time you get to that 1,000th step, you know, you're already pretty fatigued and you're still gonna keep going. You know, you gotta get to the top because you told your friends you were gonna make it to the top. So many people in that situation going up the mountain. I would see it almost every evening that I would be up there. One of the most challenging parts of this event was dealing with relationships that I was disrupting. For instance, my relationship with my wife, things got very difficult. The time commitment to do something like this is just overwhelming, and not being able to give, you know, quality time to your spouse and to other relationships in your life, it does take its toll. There's a lot of people who start off to do things like this and end up with hurt joints and messed up relationships. I don't know that it's worth it, but I didn't want to stop. I like making commitments. I like sticking with things. When I do make a commitment, I don't give up until I've done what I've said I would do. The beastliness of this disease and having to deal with it has helped me to develop a type of endurance that I can use to accomplish this challenge, going to the incline on a daily basis for a year and putting up 5 or 6 ascents. I wanted to see if it was humanly possible for a 62-year-old guy in not the best health, if he could pull off something like that.